Welcome back to another episode of the Water Matters podcast, episode number 6, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, which of course it does, because I also checked. Episode number 5 was the previous one. So I am joined once again, back by popular demand, joined by Callum Valence-Paul. Callum, how are you? Thanks for joining me.
Very good. Privileged to be back again. I think it was my mum that's put all the comments of how great I was, so that means I come back. It was back by popular demand.
I'm not going to say who it was, but it did receive positive feedback on episode number 4, I believe, when you were with us last time. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I firstly, before telling everyone what today's episode is all about, I would like to remind people of episode number 5. Episode number 5, certainly from my perspective, was one of the most interesting so far. They've all been interesting, which hopefully you'd agree if you've listened to them. But episode number 5 was up there in terms of lessons learnt for me. It was all about microplastics. And Tim Smedley, author of The Last Drop, very, very valuable contributor to the Water Matters podcast and newsletter, taught us, if you listened, loads about microplastics. There is plenty within his book about it, but it was a fascinating conversation. If you haven't listened to it or watched the episode on YouTube, then I really would encourage you to do so. To be honest, even if you're a subscriber to the Water Matters newsletter, then you will have also received the trailer for that episode. And even just watch the trailer, you'll learn some stuff. But the trailer is really quite good. Videographer Luke did a very good job on that trailer. And I think once you've watched the trailer, you will... I'm pretty certain you'll then be compelled to listen to the episode, because it's fascinating. The amount of microplastics in our water is something that we really should all know about and be more aware of. You know, it's a subject that I knew very little about before, but I'm certainly glad that I had that conversation, and it does make you think. It makes you think about what we're eating, drinking, consuming. A credit card's worth of plastic once every week was the quite shocking fact or statistic that Tim shared with us. But yeah, before we start properly, episode number 6, please, if you haven't listened to that, go and listen or watch episode number 5, all about microplastics. There's something in that for everyone's fascinating talk. So that was that one. This one is similar to episode number 4, but there is a key difference. Episode number 4 was all about water neutrality, and I made a mistake in one of the intros, and I've just made the mistake again. Episode number 4 was all about nutrient neutrality. And I made a mistake in one of the intros on episode number 4 when I said water neutrality, because they are completely different, as you're about to learn. But for some reason, my brain loves to confuse them. So this episode number 6 of the Water Matters podcast, is all about water neutrality. If you haven't listened to number 4 about nutrient neutrality, which is all about specifically about nutrients in our wastewater getting into the rivers and watercourses of the UK, and how it is preventing a lot of homes from being built in lots of regions in the UK. That's nutrient neutrality. Listen to that one if you haven't already. What we're going to discuss today is water neutrality. So, before I say anything else wrong, I'm going to hand over to Callum, please, to explain to us, for the layman's terms, if no one's ever heard of it before. I mean, you can almost work it out from the name itself, but please, what is water neutrality?
See, you've really bigged this up now, because you talked about episode 5, and I can tell your behaviour has really changed since being on that episode, because it's really stuck to you about how a plastic's worth of credit card is consumed. So I really need to do well today and in this intro. So water neutrality, as you could have guessed or presumed by it, is all about making sure that any new development is not adding to the water consumption currently in that area. So the very simple way nutrient neutrality was, so any new development, they can't make sure that any more phosphates and nitrates are making its way into the water courses, and that new development wasn't producing an even further amount. It's a very similar concept for water neutrality. So instead of it being basically when that new build is done, it can't add any additional strain to the current water supplies in the area. So if, say, 100 homes are being built in, say, Banbury, those 100 homes need to ensure they're not adding potential more strain to the current water supply currently in place. So the idea is that there's different methods that the house builders can then use in order to ensure it's then, as an overall, not a net positive.
Yeah, so before we go on to the what can be done, how is it achieved, let's just think about it, because if you really think about it, it's quite challenging. If you're building, let's continue with your example, 100 homes in Banbury, where we're recording this podcast, of course, you're going to add to the water supply strain within Banbury. You can't build 100 homes and provide people with the bare essentials of what they need to live without using water.
Exactly.
It's just impossible, right?
Yeah, because when you consider those 100 homes, they're going to be a mix of maybe 2, 3, 4 bed. So the occupancy of that site could be up to 300 people if they're all 3-bed homes. And when you consider the amount of water being used by those individuals, the average person uses 150 litres of water a day. That's 300 times 150, which is a very large number. I'm not going to do the mental arithmetic in my head. It's been very impressive. But when you look at it in those terms, consider that's how many extra litres of water a day that's being used, which is a very large amount.
Yeah, exactly. So this, in the areas where water neutrality is the aim, and again, we'll come on to the areas in a moment because it's not quite across the whole country at the moment. No. But if you really think about it, to be able to build anything, and a house, a home in particular, with 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 people living there, all, as you say, consuming or using 150, not consuming, using 150 litres per person per day. It's a huge, huge challenge, and something that I'm sure, has been discussed at length, because actually, on the face of it, that's like, how's that going to be done? That's too big. That's too much. It's a big ask, to somehow, even if you were just building one house and that house was going to have 4 people in it, to be able to make sure that those 4 people don't use 600 litres of water per day between them. That's, you've got to start thinking out the box to make that possible. So first of all, if you can find ways of achieving it, and if you can do it, then brilliant. That's kind of obviously going to help with the, one of the earlier episodes at the very start of this Water Matters podcast was all about water scarcity. And so, of course, from a water scarcity perspective, if that is possible, if water neutrality can be achieved, it will be a huge help to the country. Yeah. Especially, again, listeners, if you have listened to episodes 1 through 3, I think it comes up quite a bit. This projection that by 2050 or even sooner, I'm sure Tim said, we get to a point where water demand outstrips supply, and so that's essentially that's why things like water neutrality coming into place, I'm sure. But just really, before we go into the detail, just reflect for a moment. It's a big ask. It's a big change and a big thing to have to try to achieve. So it can't be taken lightly, because enabling this to happen is difficult.
Yes, you have to put the infrastructure in place in order for it to happen, in terms of products people can use that definitely reduce and reuse the amounts of water that they could be using. But a lot of it, I think, comes down to education, in terms of people realizing how much water they're using and what simple steps they could do every day in order to massively reduce the amount of water they're using per day.
Yes, absolutely. Although it's also because the pressure of this is on the developer themselves to make sure that somehow the property they build can be lived in by 2, 3, 4 people, depending on the number of bedrooms. The property can be lived in without it increasing the water demand in that area.
Yes.
So let's talk about some of the ways that this really, as I will keep stressing, this big ask can be achieved.
Yeah, it is massive. And when you think about it, it does really come down all to housing developers in order to really bring into action, because it's mainly yes, it's house building, but it's also building, supermarkets, shopping centres. They need to ensure that they're also not increasing the amount of demand on the current water supply in the area. So there's 3 steps to it. First one is reduce. So this is using everyday products. These are ways that you can reduce the amount of water that's being used. So these are low flow taps, aerated shower heads, all different ways that you could reduce the amount of mains water you're using by implementing more eco-friendly products. So they're the 2 examples that are usually often, and they're quick wins, because you can make sure that every tap in the house is a low flow tap, and all the shower heads in every house is, say, a aerated shower head. There's also, you can put, I think it's Hippo bags in toilet systems. We've done it recently, and this reduces the amount of water. It's simply just a bag that holds the water. I'm not too sure how it works, so I'm not selling the product here, but it helps to reduce by up to 2/3 the amount of water per flush. So stuff like that, those simple products, you can definitely reduce. There was actually a study done by the House Building Federation that showed current new build homes actually using 40 litres less per person on average. As we've kind of mentioned quite a few times, it's predicted that the average person uses 150 litres of water a day, but now they believe with new build homes they get that down to about 110, so saving 40 litres per person, as the products they're putting into new homes are the low flow taps, the aerated shower heads, so they're using less water, they're more water efficient. So that's certainly one aspect. You can save quite a lot of water, by putting in these more reducing efforts. You've then got your second step, which is reuse. So this is reusing water where possible to help reduce the amount of water you potentially use in that area. So these are systems like rainwater harvest systems, collecting rainwater and storing it in a tank, and then reusing it for future purposes, whether they be garden irrigation, toilet flushing, washing machines, washing your car, watering down the patio, all those sorts of non-potable water uses you can use rainwater harvesting for. Also within that is grey water recycling. So this is using all the water from your grey water places, which are your sinks, showers, bathtubs, I believe. The only thing you can't use is your toilet, 'cause that's black water. And again, very similar to rainwater, it recycles the water to a point it can be reused for non-potable uses. So watering the garden, flushing the toilets again, feeding the washing machine, I believe, and other outdoor uses as well. Then the third step, which is, again, another strain on developers and a bit more difficult to achieve, is this offsetting step. But this is more of, from what I've read, is about a seed fund. So developers have to put into a seed fund in order to fund water saving projects in the local area. So this could be retrofitting a system to a public building. So it could be a library, the town hall, village hall, or something like that. Once they have the measurements to say they've reduced the water consumption in that, say, village hall by installing a rainwater harvest system to feed the toilets and stuff like that, they can then use that as evidence of a net positive in terms of reducing the amount of water being consumed in that area. So they'll buy those credits in a way to then make sure the development can go through. So it's a bit of a long answer, but you've got the 3 phases of it. You've got reduce, reuse, and offset.
Thank you. And no, it makes sense. And if you really, again, if you think about it, there has to be there almost has to be a mixture of those three parts in order to achieve it.
Yeah.
Because when you build a new house or a development of new houses, they have to have they have to have potable water.
Yep.
They have to water to drink, they have to have water to shower in, water to use for their dishwasher, or dishwashing. And so you cannot use rainwater instead. You cannot use recycled grey water instead. You have to use potable water for that. So that immediately is going to mean there is more demand on the water supply in that area because you need fresh mains water for that. So, of course, firstly, it has to be, well, okay, if I need some mains water, need it, but let's minimize how much is used. So you've got to go through that whole reduce section, and that's great if they're already finding that like 40 litres is being saved on average just because of these water-saving devices, which are now so much more easily to come by. That's a brilliant start. But even then, when you go that next step, and we'll talk about this in a moment in terms of a few examples that we have, but when you go that next step and you replace some of that mains water where you can with with rainwater or with grey water recycling, that again means you're going to reduce the amount of mains water that you need, because you don't need to use mains water to flush your toilets. You don't need to use mains water to wash your car or water your plants or irrigate your lawn. So there's lots of uses that you can use rainwater for, or it's not done that much on a domestic scale, but you can use grey water recycling for. The reason it's not done as much as rainwater harvesting is it's more difficult. It's a grey water recycling system is essentially, it's treating that water has already been used. You've had a shower in it, or you've washed your hands in it. And so, of course, to get it clean enough to use it again, there's more of a treatment process.
Yes, and I think when it comes to domestic systems as well, grey water recycling much more expensive than rainwater harvesting systems because they are more complex. They do a lot of, like you say, recycling. There's more to it in terms of making sure it all connects to. So it's very tougher to do, more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. If you just think about what's actually happening, there's more is more involved. It's a process, and therefore it does cost more money. So rainwater recycling is easier to achieve, but of course rainwater harvesting requires rainwater. So it's not the complete answer either, because if you're in a very dry area of the country, then that rainwater harvesting system in a new property might not help that much at all.
And that's a great thing to say. Even now, I can't remember last time it's rained in the UK, even in January. Because my only gripe is my car is filthy because of the roads. There's all the salt and the mud that are on it, and the back of it's filthy. And I was hoping it might rain just to wash off a bit before I get it cleaned. But I thought to myself, I can't remember the last time it rained in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and absolutely, and that is the point. Like that's why even rainwater harvesting, as good as it is, it's not the be all and end all. It can't be the one-stop solution. So you can make the situation better by reducing the amount of mains water that's being used, or replacing some of the mains water use. But you've still got this amount of mains water which is being used for drinking. It's being used for washing up and that sort of stuff. That has to be mains water. So you have to have that third step, or that third part of the water neutrality structure, which is to offset. And so, whether that is installing a rainwater harvesting system in a local school so that it saves hundreds and thousands of litres of water that was being used in that school, that's being supplied off the same mains water supply as the properties that you're building. You've reduced it in that school, therefore you can use it in these new homes. That's essentially what's happening, right?
Yeah, because when you think about it in terms of numbers, right? When it comes to human consumption, we say about 150 litres on average used. If in a perfect world they've installed a rainwater harvest system and they use the rainwater harvesting for the fullest extent, it will save about 50%, we usually say, on average, of household use. So that's your toilets, that's your washing machine, that's garden irrigation. So that means about 75 litres of water is still needed for potable uses. So as you mentioned, drinking, bathing, showering, feeding your dishwasher. And say if you've got then your 40 litres reduced as well by, you've got low flow taps, you've got aerated shower heads, you've got bags in your toilet systems, that means there's still about 30 to 35 litres of water a day. That's mains water that you then need to offset. And if you look at it on a broader scale of that, say 100 home development with 3 people in, that's a lot of water they still need to offset. So those offsetting projects are so vast and so important to ensuring that water neutrality does work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's why this has to be looked at in specific areas that are under water stress, and these new developments have to be thought about so that they are not adding to that stress.
Yeah.
And so even though they have to build those new houses, we know we need more houses, but they need to make an improvement somewhere else in the same water supply area so that this doesn't make it worse. It's essentially what's happening.
Yeah. And you said it, you touched on there with, you see in the news, there needs to be more homes built. There's a housing crisis. There needs to be 100,000 homes built pretty much, it seems like every minute in this country. But it needs to be done sustainably. It needs to ensure that it's done in a way that that the houses last, but also doesn't cause any environmental damage in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'm sure people are wondering, where is this happening then?
Yep.
So yeah, from your knowledge, where is water neutrality
A lot of it is in the south of England. So Sussex is a massive, massive, massive hotspot for it. That's where a lot of it is being pushed. There's a lot of credit schemes being brought up there. There's lots of planning permission being put on hold in Sussex, literally within a few towns. This is where it's really at its peak. But as we'll learn from episode 4 with nutrient neutrality, that started in the south as well, and then branched out to other areas. With nutrient neutrality, it went from, I think it was the Solent area, it then went to Kent, it went to Norfolk, it went to Herefordshire, it's now up in Middlesbrough, it'll probably go to Lincolnshire next, it's down in Cornwall, Devon, and it'll be the exact same for water neutrality. It'll start in Sussex, it'll make its way to Kent, because they're very similar, very highly stressed area with water. They'll go to Norfolk and Suffolk because they really don't have a lot of water up there. It hardly rains there as well over the last couple of years. And it will go around into counties because the councils that are putting this into place with planning will talk to other council members from other counties, and they'll start to push out in their respective areas.
Yeah, and it is one of those things, a little bit like nutrient neutrality. Once you've got a solution and a structure that works, it does surely become a no-brainer to roll out everywhere.
Yeah, and I think at the moment what people need is proof. So they need proof it's working in, say, Sussex, to then go to Essex, to Kent, to Norfolk, to Suffolk, and say, this is what we're currently doing that's helping us to reduce the amount of water that's currently being, or the strain of water currently in our area. We recommend you do the same here.
And what examples have we got to show that it is working, or that it is happening? Because water neutrality has been, I feel like we've been aware of that term for a number of years now, and there's been blog posts and articles about it on various websites for at least the past 2 to 3 years. But it's only in my gut feeling is I've only really felt like, certainly in our day jobs, in our business at Graph UK, I think it's really only been the last 9 to 12 months maximum that we've started to really see the impact of it in terms of some of the projects that we've supplied.
Yeah, I think neutrality was much more fast moving, and there was more developments quicker. Water neutrality has certainly been slower. Um, I think I certainly first come across it in about 2023. I think that's when I first heard about it. But even there's examples and news stories of it going back all the way to 21, 22. So it has been around for years. It's just gradually becoming more of a thing. But especially in that area within Sussex, we're seeing homes or large housing developments with rainwater harvest systems specified. And we haven't seen that for years. It was certainly a thing during, it was the Sustainable
Code for Sustainable Homes.
That's it, where it was part of developers. If they had rainwater harvest systems installed, then it would act as basically a tick box exercise. Yes, you've proved that your housing development is sustainable. But the mistake they put there is they just used small tanks with, the smallest tank possible with the smallest pump package possible to water the garden. Whereas these systems, they're used back in the home with direct systems, so there is more thought to it. But at the moment, we're seeing these large plots, maybe 200-300 home developments, with a rainwater harvest system in each property.
Yeah, so if you were buying a new home or moving into a new home in areas like Sussex where water neutrality is priority, then the things that you could expect to be different about your house compared to perhaps one you lived in before is all these low flow kind of water saving devices, different tap heads, shower heads, all that sort of stuff. Plus, a lot of these homes will have their own rainwater harvesting system, which will most likely be an underground tank in your garden, which will contain a filter, which all of the rainwater that falls onto the roof of your house will be captured by the guttering and then down the downpipes, which will all be channeled into the top of that rainwater harvesting tank. It gets filtered on the way in just to remove any leaves or moss or anything that is picked up from the roof of your house. It's still very, very clean because it has literally just fallen onto your roof tiles, down the guttering, down pipes, and then into your tank. And then that water, you'll be using that water most likely again for it'll be connected to your toilets, so you'll be flushing your toilets with harvested rainwater. It will most likely be supplied to your outside tap, so you'll be, if you're if you have a garden hose attached to your outside tap, or you have you're filling up watering cans or buckets, that sort of thing for washing your car, you'll be using rainwater. And so there will be a mains water backup to that rainwater harvesting system for periods like Callum just described, where it hasn't rained for a period of time, and the rainwater level within your tank has dropped to such an extent that it will be filled with mains water instead.
But we're also seeing on a smaller scale with housing developments specifying water butts. Because obviously we say about rainwater harvesting systems, it's an underground tank, you use it in the home for toilets, for your washing machine, but we're even seeing large house developments with water butts specified that they need one attached to the home. It's very much still, in my opinion, it's not the best way to do it, because with a water butt you are just ticking a box in a sense. You're not everyone that has a garden might not be using their water butt, so it's just filling up and will just act as kind of a temporary storage unit in a sense for the rainwater. And I was also thinking about this the other day, when it comes to water butts on homes, you're only collecting 50% of the rainwater. Most roofs are pitched, so if it falls off the back into the water butt, fine, but if it may fall off the front, it just goes down the gutter room, down the downpipe and into the storm drain network. Whereas a rainwater harvest system, most of the pipe work then leads directly into the tank before it would flow into the storm drain.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that really helps if every single property in the UK had a water butt connected to it. It would help both on the water sort of supply, water scarcity issue, but almost even more so on the flood prevention side of things as well, because having 200, 300, 500 litres of water stored in that water butt in people's gardens means it's not in the sort of drainage network elsewhere. And then when we do have these heavy storm events, it really helps from that perspective. But no, so hopefully people are beginning to understand sort of what water neutrality is, why it's important. I hope is pretty obvious if you're listening to the Water Matters podcast, because you'll no doubt have an appreciation of the situation that we're in, or certainly heading towards in the UK in terms of water shortages and that sort of stuff. But is there anything else that we haven't mentioned, that we haven't touched on in terms of water neutrality? We've spoken about what it is. We've spoken about how it works in terms of the reduce, reuse, and then offset, those three parts to the water neutrality structure. We've talked about where it's mainly happening, but the fact that, almost certainly it will roll out to more and more areas. We've talked about a couple of examples that we've had where we are supplying rainwater harvesting systems on a plot-by-plot basis on bigger housing developments that are having to achieve water neutrality. But outside of all that, is there anything important that we have not mentioned that you think listeners should be aware of?
The only thing I would say is important to say is it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think it's only going to get bigger and more important, and it's going to be rolled out even more. From certainly the feeling I get is that the government and the people making the legislation are really strong on this subject. There is, as I mentioned earlier, offsetting schemes already in place. The Sussex North offsetting water scheme, I think it is, SNOWS. That's a credit-based scheme, and we've seen it with nutrient neutrality. We've seen it with carbon. As soon as credit schemes pop up, then it's here to stay, because they'll want to buy the credits, sell them off for a fair bit of money. And also another part of it is it even went to High Court. Someone tried to tackle water neutrality. He lost his case. I've at first felt sympathy for him, because when I first read it, it sounded like he moved in, or he started building on this bit of land before water neutrality was a thing, and then they kind of said, no, you still have to adhere by it. But upon reading even further, he moved onto the land before even getting planning permission in the first place, and started using and building on the land. So I then kind of lost sympathy. But they are very strong in the case. It was even simple with nutrient neutrality. I think it's here to stay. There's no whispers from a new government in terms of changing legislation or kind of easing it a bit more to help houses come through. So I would expect it to come more and more. And I think we'll probably see more expansion of it this year. I think last year we certainly saw a massive expansion for nutrient neutrality, because there was proof, there was credit schemes, there was systems in place to deal with it. With water neutrality, I think they're probably more there's more infrastructure and products in place to achieve it, in terms of low flow taps, aerated shower heads, rainwater harvest systems that are more than capable. There's greywater recycling systems on a large scale that are more than capable of achieving it. So I think if it's not this year, then certainly next year we'll start to see massive expansions of water neutrality.
Yeah, and I think because so many buildings have been built without water-saving devices, without rainwater harvesting systems, without sustainable water management in mind, there are so many opportunities for that offsetting part to be achieved.
100%. I think the best way for people to really see the proof of it is if they have a water meter currently in their home, or if they don't, apply for one, because most of them are given free by the council these days, then install the low flow taps, the shower heads, and the toilet system bags, and see for yourself, because that will show how much water your house is reducing. And say if your whole street did it, you'd start to realize, oh, this could actually work. So I guess with the consistent message of this is, well, just try it and see for yourself, and then you'll start to understand how much water you can save.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does, this subject fits perfectly with a lot of the conversations that we've had on this Water Matters podcast, because this is in relation to houses being built. This is in relation to developments of all sorts of buildings, and therefore, you might wonder, why is it relevant to me, or what does it matter to me? But actually, this topic of water neutrality, if we all really thought about it and we all tried to achieve it, then the outcome would be we'd use less water, and that would help. And so, you may not be able to eliminate it altogether. Of course, we need to drink the stuff to stay alive, and we'd like to wash and take a shower in clean possible mains water. But if we think about how much we can reduce what we're using, how much we can reuse something else instead, where possible, and then perhaps we can't get involved with the offsetting part just yet until maybe there will be options, to your example, where streets can suddenly become a way of being involved in these offsetting credits and things like that. But there's always something we can do, and just to think about not adding more stress to the water supply in your area is a really helpful place to start. And so hopefully people have hopefully this has got the cogs turning around. How much water do you use, does your household use, and what could you do to reduce or eliminate some of that mains water usage?
100%.
So good. Thank you very much. Thank you for that very clear, helpful explanation on water neutrality. I hope that the listeners have learnt something from this episode.
I hope so too, because you were ranting and raving about Tim's last appearance.
I'm fascinated by microplastics. I knew nothing about them at all, and I still have much more to learn about them. But this is equally as important, and I think, and maybe more so for some, because there are a lot of houses that need to be built in this country, and if they were and could all be built in line with water neutrality and not add more stress to every single water authority, then that would be a massive improvement for the UK. And so it's a topic, as you say, it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. It's one that should make a really positive difference to the country's sustainable water management situation. So hopefully it's helpful. Hopefully you've learned something. Thank you very much for listening. If you are a regular listener, I hope that you have subscribed, and please do share this share this episode with your family, your friends. We really do appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, we send a digital email newsletter every other Wednesday, so fortnightly on a Wednesday morning. You will, if you go to watermatters.life, all you have to do is put your email address in, and you'll get yourself on that list so that you'll receive those weekly, fortnightly emails. And then there's always content in there that's been added by ourselves, by Tim, and by all sorts of other people as well that are contributing to the Water Matters podcast and newsletter. But thank you very much for listening. Hope everyone is well, and we look forward to being back with you soon with some more Water Matters. Thank you. Bye for now.